Hey guys, it's Joe, and this is Fighting Words, the martial arts library. And this is Tangent Tuesday. So, on the second Tuesday of every month, I go live and I just sort of riff on whatever topic I choose to. You catch me glancing around. My cats are maybe getting ready to fight. Anyway, so um, this month, and since my last Tangent Tuesday, I was on a Facebook group, martial arts Facebook group, and a guy basically asked, what does it mean to be a well-rounded martial artist? Um, and mostly seemed concerned that there was, so much else out there to learn. I think his primary background is a traditional striking art, and he's gotten into a sport style grappling art. And there's a lot to learn that he's just not familiar with. So, you know, what, how do I do this? I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about what it means to be a well rounded martial artist. Um, I think it could mean different things to different people. Certainly in the Chinese martial arts, I've heard that there is meant to be a balance between martial skills and healing skills. And I certainly recall seeing instances where, famous martial artists in the past from China had also been like bone setters and apothecaries. So some people may interpret well-rounded martial artist to not just have martial skills, but again, also the healing skills. Um, I've this is like third hand. I had a buddy of mine quote his instructor, who was quoting Dan Inosanto. So I can't verify this, but apparently he had mentioned that um, as a martial artist, you can choose to embrace different paths. The warrior, the healer, sort of like we've just covered. I think he also mentioned, the teacher. I don't know what other. I think there was more than just those three, but so that's another idea of maybe I'll try to be a little bit of all of those. We can also look back, at least as far as the 1970s, in martial arts competitions. You tended to have people who would specialize in either sparring or forms competition. Obviously, there were people who did both, but especially today, you generally have people who, are either forms champions or fighting sparring champions. So, in that context, someone who is well rounded could be doing equally well at both of those, and maybe we can add other aspects of that, like breaking, for instance. That's another aspect of competition. Another physical manifestation of martial arts is breaking boards or tiles or bricks. And since the mid 90s, the when the UFC got started in 1993 and became more popular, the idea of what a well-rounded martial artist was, at least in that context, was people who were skilled at both striking and grappling. So for this discussion, I'm going to lean a little bit more toward that. I would consider a well-rounded martial artist as far as what their physical capabilities are, what they've put their skill points into, you might say. So in that context, I would say broadly we have three categories. There is striking and grappling, but also weapons. Those would be the broad spectrum of skills that I would take a look at. So, how do we become skilled at something that can be so disparate from one another? I mean, there's definitely a difference between, like Filipino, knife techniques and Okinawan staff techniques. There's definitely a difference between Olympic Taekwondo and Olympic boxing. And in the grappling world, I compare sumo versus Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something. So, how do we go about? This individual seems sort of overwhelmed. There's always somebody better. No matter how much I train, I'm just not going to be that skilled at all these things. I'm going to go ahead and say you don't need to be. I think that instead of looking at the vast breadth of techniques and strategies and arts available, that we should define what our primary goal is. Everything starts with the goal, then we get to work backwards, right? So if the goal is to compete in mixed martial arts and you're coming from a striking background, let's say Muay Thai, there are definitely things about grappling that you will need to be skilled in, but you won't need to be skilled at all of them. If you, like me, are trying to find skills that are transferable to certain competition styles as well as likely self-defense scenarios, then you can begin looking at, okay, if, for instance, what do I want to do if I've been taken down and someone's trying to hold me down either to win a contest, or to physically assault me? There are so many different guard games in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I don't need to worry about all of them. I just need to have a few go to. Me personally, I prefer butterfly guard and half guard because to me, those are the guard options that, first of all, don't require a gi. So if I'm in a situation where the person isn't wearing a jacket or something like a gi, this stuff still works. But also, my goal is to not be held down instead of, as you see some people do, start attacking from the guard and make that their go-to position, like I'm going to find a submission from here. I'm not that guy. I want to get back to my feet or I want to reverse and get on top. Butterfly guard, you have your feet under the guy's center of gravity. You can kick him over. In half guard, you can easily off balance the guy. You can go underneath. You can scoot around behind him. So those are my preferred guard games because my objective is to get out of there. And of course, on top of this, I also have, well, what happens if I can't do that? What if the guy's in a position where he's pressuring forward? Well, I have a plan B. My preferred version is what's called Williams guard. This frames the hit away, it isolates one arm. In a self defense situation or even a situation where striking is concerned, I can threaten to attack one of the arms. And I basically put his head between me and his other arm. So he's got to like punch through his own head to get to me. So those are best for my scenario. Similarly, when it comes to weapons, I mean, I would love to learn an awful lot about swords. I grew up with like Highlander and the 1990 Zorro series. Like I'm fascinated with swords. What am I going to train in? Stick fighting and knife fighting. Because in a self-defense situation, I'm going to have to, if I don't have something on me, then any improvised weapon is going to resemble those tools more than a sword. Doesn't mean I don't get to train with a sword. Just means I make my focus the things that I expect to encounter in the scenarios that I'm preparing for. So again, this isn't, do I have to master 57 different weapons? No, go for one or two. Although once you get more in depth into all of this, you begin to see how there are connections and skills that cross over between different systems, different techniques. So again, you do not need to be like skilled at everything. You don't need to consume, the breadth of every martial art. I mean, if you have the time and resources, knock yourself out. I totally would. In my perfect world, I would be training until my body fell apart. um, but if you don't have the time and you don't have the resources, I am assuming that my audience is going to begin with at least one base martial art. You might be fortunate to train at a school that teaches multiple martial arts throughout the week. I got to do that a few times. So, after I get done with Jeet Kune Do, then I can go to Kali and I get to learn stick fighting, stuff like that. But if you do not have those options available, where do you go? I would say the first thing maybe to check out is, what friends you have met during your training process. Just with the people I trained with, um, I had a guy that I would go to who would help me with judo, because that was his specialty. We would, work on like no-gi judo because that's what I wanted to focus on. I had another buddy who specialized in like Muay Thai style clinch work, and he helped me work on that, and I learned to blend it with my more wrestling oriented clinch work that I'd picked up. Similarly, I had another friend that was, good at all of Eddie Bravo's material, half guard and rubber guard. So, we worked together on that. I was the boxing and leg lock guy when people wanted to work on those things. So you may already know somebody that you can, pair up with in your free time and work on building those skills, as long as you make sure to make clear, I'm trying to get skills for this specific situation. What do you have that will help me work on that? And I would say after that, uh, check out things like seminars, free trial classes. A lot of places have those. Yeah, drop into a place for a week, learn a little bit of what they have. You're not going to learn the martial art, but again, you don't need to in order to be well rounded. But you might pick up a few things that you can bring back to your own training. You know, um, Obviously, everything needs practice. It definitely helps if you are working with someone who is giving you the resistance that you need to act against in order to test what you're training in. You know, if you don't have someone who is good um, at pins and hold downs, then you don't have someone who is going to be very good to help you work on your escapes from being pinned, because they're just not going to know what to do. I've been paired up with those people. you know, they're on top, but you could like push them over with a finger. Like you don't have any base, you don't have any control. Similarly, if you are working on like, okay, I need to work on my defense against kicks, and your training partner can't get their foot above their knee, maybe you should find somebody else to work on that with. So yeah, um, if possible, train in more than one place if you're not getting that well-roundedness from the place you're training. I would obviously say, clear it with your instructor, or at least inform them about it. Sometimes guys get a little testy. It's like, no, no, no. I still want to train here. You're still getting my money, but also I want to learn how to throw guys. So I need to spend some time over here. And of course, you know, distribute your time wisely. And again, we're not looking to be experts at everything. To quote Ian Abernethy, who I love, um, I don't have to be an expert at everything, but I should be a beginner at nothing. And that's sort of my goal. I don't need to be the best at this technique or that martial art if my primary objective is to have practical usable skills. Instead, I'm going to figure out, okay, this is an area that I don't really train in. I'm going to need to work on that. And I'm going to need 3 or 4 workable things. You know, I can expand on that. I think during the course of training, most people will. But, you know, if you've never trained takedowns or throws before, pick one. Pick one and get good at it. Then, after you've worked on it a while, figure out, okay, so what's the most common way that people are trying to stop me from doing this? And let me have an answer for that. So now you got 2 things, you know, maybe 3, depending on, what reactions you're getting from people. Same thing with, fundamental striking. I would say get good at shadow boxing, not even shadow kickboxing. Just learn how to stand, keep your balance, have a good defensive position, learn how to throw your strikes without, off balancing yourself, without overextending yourself. You know, you can add in kicking later. Make sure you can stand and move and again throw basic hand strikes because with the exception of certain sport competitions, these are going to be your main striking tools. So get good at those. You don't need to be an expert, but be competent. Um, I think a great example was when Rulon Gardner had, I think it was his single mixed martial arts match. Gardner was an Olympic gold medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling, so that's all upper body work, and he fought an Olympic judoka in a mixed martial arts match, and his striking was very basic, but also very disciplined. So everything was here, go out, go back, go out, go back. And he rarely strayed from that formula. He wasn't swinging wild. He wasn't, off balancing himself too much when he was thrown in. So take a skill, be disciplined at developing it. And again, it doesn't have to be the breadth of technique. If you've never done kicks before, pick a single kick. I would advise either a front kick of some sort, because you can do snap kicks or thrust kicks or push kicks, and or a round kick, because the front kick, I think, makes itself, it has more uh, availability in a self-defense situation and can also help you sort of reset if you drive your opponent away, get them away, reset. The round kick is probably the most versatile of the kicks. You can aim it practically from the ankle to the top of the head. You can land with anything from your toes, especially if you have hard-soled shoes on. Toes, instep, heel, shin, ankle, kind of your knee, although at that point it's more like a round knee. You know, so pick something, get good at using that thing. You know, and then once you're good at it, once you've incorporated it into everything else that you're doing, you know, um, I mean, I haven't really touched on weapons, but I my well, I guess technically my second weapons art because I did learn a little Kobudo. Um, but we learned some Kali, and we were taught that the stick is a substitute for basically a short chopping sword, similar to a machete. You know, so there were ways that we used that would have been compatible with a blade. I would say that I don't think that there's really a one for one. You know, I'm missing the word in my head that I'm supposed to be using now. So it's not exactly the same, and a stick is definitely a stick, and not a sword. But by learning those motions and learning the footwork and body motion that goes along with it, you can pick up a single-handed bladed weapon, and at least have a lot of similar movements because you've done this work with this stick, right? So again, some things do translate. Again, you don't have to be an expert at everything, but For me, I think that a well-rounded martial artist should be able to spar in boxing or kickboxing, should be able to do um, judo randori, should be able to do ground grappling, and at the very least, not look out of place. Again, you don't have to smash dudes, you know, but you also shouldn't embarrass yourself, and also weapons sparring if that's available. So yeah, that's where I sit with it. That for me is a well-rounded martial artist. I'm interested in hearing your opinions on that. But yeah, you should be comfortable and competent at striking, standing grappling, ground grappling, weapons use. You know, not an expert, but comfortable enough so that you will never be in a situation concerning those things where you're just completely lost and don't have anything to do. And I would say, again, focus on, I think the Japanese term is tokoiwaza, like specializing in certain techniques, certain skill sets, and then building around those. Because again, you don't have to be an expert. Like, rarely will you find a martial artist who knows, frankly, every single thing about their own martial art and can perform everything in there at a high level of skill, much less someone who has cross trained. And I've known some really good martial artists who are very skilled in many, many things, but I'm also willing to bet in nearly all cases I could find someone who was more skilled in one of those areas than they were. That's not a knock on them. That's the goal. I think it might have been Heinlein who said specialization is for insects. you know, don't be a specialist as a martial artist. I mean, there are times when you can be if you're like trying to pass on a tradition or something. But for functional martial arts, yeah, just have something you can do in empty-handed open space fighting, in clinch fighting, in ground fighting with a weapon. Have something that you're good at in any of those areas. At least one thing. Because I'm willing to bet if you get good at that one thing, you will probably start getting better at the support skills that go around that. Anyway, that's all I got. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. Thank you for joining me. And again, if you have any thoughts, please comment on them. Now, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.